Hey everybody, welcome to Common Dialogue Day. My name is Tony Farina. I'm an Associate Professor of Humanities for the College for Professional and Graduate Studies. Welcome to my presentation. I am pre-recording it for two reasons. Number one, this is my first time using Teams in a group this large, and I wanted to make sure that I could switch between screens easily because my presentation requires me switching between lots of screens, and I didn't want to have to waste time with that. Number two, I'm also in the path of a soon-to-be tropical storm down in Florida, so I did not want to miss this opportunity. So I'm either here, hello, and I'm going to be taking your questions after my presentation, or I'm not here, and Professor Ryder will be taking the questions after the presentation. You'll be in great hands. So let's talk about truth. That's our top topic of the day, right? So fake news. And when I say fake news, I don't necessarily mean fake news in the news sense, although I do, and we'll talk a little bit about that today, but I mean valid sources. How do you make sure your sources are valid? In an academic setting, it's important that your sources are true. You're representing yourself when you submit a paper. If your sources are not valid, if they are sketchy, you are sketchy. You can push that off and say, oh, well, my sources weren't any good. It wasn't me, I didn't know. But that's the thing, you're in charge of knowing. You have to know. It's up to you. You can't pass the buck because you aren't answering in real time. You're not guessing. You're not on a game show where you can just guess on Double Jeopardy and get it right and move on. Whew. When you're doing a paper, it's not in real time. You have time to do things. So in order to make sure that you're doing things correctly, you need to take the time and you need to do deep dives. So let's take a look at how we make sure our sources are valid and make sure that our facts matter. Okay? So the most important thing that you need to know is to just say no to all wikis. All wikis. The reason you say no to all wikis is because they are edited by any person who's in front of a keyboard. Just because the information you find on a website is right, air quotes, doesn't mean that the source is valid. This is why wikis are never valid, because they can be edited by anyone at any time. For example, welcome to Wikipedia, where I created a login for this. 2020 SHU Common Dialogue Day, exclamation point. I created this. It takes just a few seconds to create a new account. I have logged in, you can see here, but when you log into Wikipedia from somewhere else, for example, in Microsoft Edge, instead of Chrome, you see I'm not logged in. You can just create an account. It literally takes just seconds. All you have to do is make up a username. So that's what I did. So let's do a quick search for Siena Heights University. And here we are, hello. So we can see this. Here's our history, here's our campuses, anything that we want to do. Well, let's talk about this. Here's where it mentions it's in Adrian, Michigan, and it explains who we are and where our other campuses are. Well, what if I wanted to edit something and mention that SHU is across town from Adrian College. So I've just made that change to the Wikipedia page. I'm going to say this is a minor edit, and I'm going to publish the change. Okay, so there it is right now. All I have to do is log out so that you can see that I'm not in there anymore, and there it is. If I go to a different web browser completely and just type in Siena Heights University, there it is. I just made a change in real time as I was recording this, and now it shows up in different browsers, logged in, logged out. Now, this may be taken out in 10 minutes. This may be taken out in 10 days. This is a fact. This could stay here forever. But the fact is that I'm just some random person. I came in and I edited this page. Imagine how many people around the world are looking at any page at any given time. Now, using the Siena Heights University page is smaller, but look at, here's the top things, the top and the news things. And people are going to go through here and make changes to Kamala Harris's page, to Joe Biden's page, Hurricane Eta. This is the thing that is coming at me, by the way. There will be a tropical storm by the time it gets to me. So people could go in. I could go into the Hurricane Eta page and just stick my own name in there if I wanted to. It's heading towards Tony. If I wanted to do that, I absolutely could. And while that's true, that is, of course, a true thing. Is that something that I should be changing? So I could go in and make a change to any of these things and add that it's coming to my house, but I shouldn't do that. And I could. And there's more and more people using these than are using the Siena Heights University page. But the fact remains, anybody could be looking at it at any time. And so if we just do a quick look again, now that I've been rambling on for a few minutes, we go back to Siena Heights University. Has anyone? Nope, it's still there. So you should probably check this after this presentation's over. I'm making this on Sunday. You see if it's still there on Tuesday. You can see that it's there a few minutes later. We'll check in again at the end of the presentation and see, okay? So now you know why to just say no to wikis. Remember, you don't want to be first and wrong. You want to be right and last. And ideally, you could be right and first. That takes time. That takes planning. If you've only got 2 weeks to write a paper, and those deadlines exist for a reason. So I'm a person who always tries to get done ahead of deadlines, which means I have to set aside the time to be right and first, or right and turn it in early. Just being in a hurry and getting it done and just grabbing whatever comes first on a search engine, that's not going to help you in any way, shape, or form, right? You can get a trivia question correct, but it doesn't actually mean that you're an expert. You can just guess and get it right. That's different. Being right isn't the same as being valid. In academics, those two terms don't mean the same thing. Being right and being valid are totally different. And so I'm going to give you a little background and show you what that means, okay? What you're going to do is you're going to want to be a journalist, right? So before you can do anything else, you want to find out if the source is valid. The source is valid, not the person who's writing it, but the source itself at its root source. Years ago, there was a writer for the New York Times who was fake. He was a completely fake guy. He had a fake name. He had published for years in the New York Times. The New York Times is still a valid source, even though they had one journalist who was doing false things under a false name. The same is true in reverse. You could have a journalist writing for a source that is invalid. And so even though that person seems to have some credence, the source itself doesn't, so therefore throw it out. So who wrote it, why did the person write it, and who paid him or her to do it? All those things matter. More importantly, the who paid him or her to do it, right? Follow the money. If the organization won't tell you who they are not valid. If the organization is sketchy, but is presenting itself in a certain way, it's not a valid source. So let me show you. So this is who.is. It's a place where it can tell you who owns different websites and who they are and what they are. So let's take a look at this website called Newsmax. I want you to take a look at it. It looks like it's a news source. News, right? And over here, we're going to see that you've got a correspondent and then insiders. All these insiders. Look at all of these people are writing opinions. You've got one journalist. There's a red flag. Most of the people who are presenting on your webpage are insiders, are opinion pieces, one journalist. Well, I'm not a big fan of seeing 20-to-1 journalists to opinion pieces. That makes me feel like the whole website is a little sketchy. But let's check them out here on who.is. If we go here, Safe Names is just, again, the name of a web. They host websites. It's like GoDaddy or anything like that. But look at this. We have an address, but there's no phone number. There is an email address, but that doesn't look like it's Newsmax. It doesn't say who owns it. That's disconcerting. The fact that there's not even a company name, it's keeping it private. The fact that there's not a company name or that this information is totally private, data protected, not disclosed, what does that say? Why would someone run a news organization, a news site, and not tell you who it is? That's a huge red flag. The other huge red flag is, again, I've got one journalist, and there's even more all insiders. We've got more insiders. So we've got one journalist to all these opinion pieces. So we are going to just say, before we even click, we can do a deep dive into who John Gizzi is, and we're going to find out that John Gizzi is a journalist. He does real journalism. He digs deep. He does some investigation. He does some opinions, but generally, he's going to present facts. Okay, that's what he is. He's a factual journalist. We can do a deep dive into John Gizzi and find out that that's true. However, when the rest of the stuff that's on the Newsmax website, the vast majority of the content that's there is opinion, and the fact that we can't know who owns Newsmax, we have to throw that whole source out, even though John Gizzi is a valid source himself. He's a valid journalist, but he's writing for an invalid source. If John Gizzi is writing somewhere else, we have to then look into that website, into that news organization. We have to do that next deep dive. So if we take a look at BuzzFeed, which is another one of these places that kind of comes across as news, but maybe isn't news, we can take a look here. Okay, domain name BuzzFeed, Mark Monitor is just there like GoDaddy or anything like that. They've got an abuse, well, that means that's not great that they're getting a bunch of abuse content, but we don't see anything. They do have an admin name, but how do we reach them? How do I get hold of BuzzFeed if I've got issues with BuzzFeed? I have to call their web address hosting site. They don't want me to be able to get hold of them, to connect to them. They don't want me to know they're using this Mark Monitor company to hide who owns them. That's disconcerting too. Well, let's take a look at what BuzzFeed looks like. Lots of you probably have been to BuzzFeed before. So there's some news, but look at it again. Here's the news. And what is BuzzFeed? It's a bunch of clickbaity, I mean, it's a lot of, I mean, this is, people are going to say, oh, well, BuzzFeed News says. Well, but look at what BuzzFeed is. I mean, look, at the top, there's all this stuff. Quizzes. This is what BuzzFeed really is. There's shopping, there's video, there's Tasty, all this other bizarre stuff that's in BuzzFeed. Do they have some news? Sure. Sure they do. But is BuzzFeed a valid source? Well, they're going out of their way to obfuscate and tell you who they aren't. Their main thing is junk, clickbaity thing, and quizzes. Okay, so if the main thing that a website has is for you to find out which Buffy character you are, I'm Giles, by the way, then it's probably not a valid source to get your news. Look elsewhere. Just do. Go to places that make sense. Well, where are places that make the most sense? Let's check back into our Siena Heights University thing here real quick. I refreshed the page. Looks like it's still there. Still says my fix is there. So what do we consider a valid source? Well, we have two that are great places to go. Let's go to MySiena. You guys all have a login to MySiena, right? So I'm going to log in to MySiena. And what I'm going to see is right here. I'm going to see library databases. I'm going to go here to find information. The library databases have news organizations, they have deep dives into literary journals, and the best thing about these is that they're going to be sources that can be verified. If you find it in the databases, that means it's not going to be junk news. It's not going to be someone who's competing for your dollars with clicks over a quiz about which kind of cake you are. They're not going to try to convince you to read one real journalist so that you can then follow down a rat hole of a bunch of crazy opinion pieces about why whatever agenda that website has. Limit your search. This is the most important thing I can. Limit your search and go deep. Two things. 75% of people never scroll past the first page of a search page results. Think about that. 75% of people. You're all sitting in your homes. You're sitting in a room somewhere. Think about that. Do the math. How many people are in this presentation? 25% of you go to page 2. I suspect that number is probably being generous. I suspect it's more than that. This is the most recent data from September of 2020. 75% of people never scroll past the first page, which means whatever the first page is, that's the stuff you're going to take. Well, who is in the first page? The stuff that's in the first page is paid results, is Wikipedia, stuff that has the highest number of clicks. Some people pay to get moved to the front, even though it's not an ad, they pay to get moved to the first page. If you're paying to be on the first page because you know 75% of the people are going to get there, do you care if your information is right, or do you just want clicks because you're trying to make money? Google Scholar and SHU databases or other databases don't, they're not out for money. There's not ads there. When we go to the Siena Heights databases, there's no ads. Let's go to Google Scholar. There's no ads. So what's the cool thing about this is that you can separate it down, you can narrow your search, and you can make sure that you're finding things that are valid, that are analyzed, that are peer reviewed. Are you going to find the quickest and easiest search results using Google Scholar and using your databases when you're doing your data digging? You aren't. It will take longer. You're going to have to click to page 2. You're not going to get distracted by which kind of cake you are quiz, because that's irrelevant. You're trying to be right. You're not trying to be first. Being right takes time. It's not in your best interest to just jump on the first thing. So I typed in COVID-19 cures into Google Scholar. I've got 2,300 hits. If I were to just go to regular Google or Bing or anywhere, and I typed in COVID-19 cures, look at that. Look at the difference. A billion, almost 2 billion, as opposed to 2,300. Then I can limit my search this way. I can give it by date. I can sort it by relevance. I can just do since 2020. Now I'm down to 9,000. And look, I can see .org, .gov. These are real sources from where I'm coming. I'm going to find really valid sources. If I'm here, I've got almost 2 billion search results. I mean, come on. Sure, the FDA.gov, okay, that seems valid. Healthline, what do we know about Healthline? I'm going to assume if we were to do a deep dive into Healthline, we're going to find out that they are probably a clickbaity company whose job, the fact that they already want cookies, they want me to accept cookies just to be on their website, that's a problem. So Healthline Media is a Red Venture company. Red Ventures. Oh, see, I can't even find out who Red Ventures are without accepting trackers on my computer. That's weird, isn't it? Let's see who Red Ventures are. Powered by proprietary tech platform, Red Ventures build personalized experience that meet people wherever they are in their online journeys and make it easier to find information to relevant products. So Healthline is selling stuff. They're selling you products. Well, I'm going to assume Healthline probably isn't the best place to find information, where that means all Healthline is going to try to do is get me to buy something at the end of my journey of research. It took that long. It just took an extra beat for me to find out that Healthline is not a valid source, because look at just what you scrolled to the bottom. Contact us. They're not. Healthline Media does not provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. It sure looks like it does. I mean, look at all this stuff. Here's tips to help me surviving coronavirus anxiety. We don't provide that information, but it sure looks like we're providing the information. This looks like a website that's something that's going to be amazing to use, but doing the extra beat. It has somebody who's got a PhD, a nurse, somebody who's a doctorate and a nurse is writing on Healthline. That makes it look, whoa, look at this person. She obviously is a trusted source, but she's writing for a junk website. So even though she may have her heart in the right place, the website itself has ulterior motives. They're not there to inform you. It's not a valid source, even though they've hired a nurse who has a PhD, right? It's that easy. You're not going to find that stuff at Google Scholar. You're not going to find it here. Narrow your search, do the right thing, spend the time, be right. Be right. It is always better to be last and right than first and wrong. Facts matter. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Let's have a chat.